The Mission Impossible franchise has been one of the most remarkable franchises over the last 25, actually, I think 27 years now, since 1996. So, this is obviously one of the great action franchises, really setting itself apart from pretty much anything else because of the reliance, the insistence on using mostly practical effects because Tom Cruise is just a madman and he continues to prove himself as one of the most committed, one of the true movie stars of his time. So, Dead Reckoning, this is technically the sixth and a half Mission Impossible film. I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has seen all of the films, definitely a fan of this franchise, and I'm a fan of Tom Cruise, even though I like his more quiet performances. I like, Born on the 4th of July, and Eyes Wide Shut, and so on and so forth. And there's actually another film, Minority Report, which kind of reminds me, the plot of this film kind of reminds me of Minority Report. And if you see the movie, you might start to put it all together. So, Dead Reckoning, interesting title. I think it has something to do with the shipwreck at the beginning of the film. That's just something that I made the connection to. The plot of this movie, I think we can all say that the plot of spy thrillers is something that usually isn't too much to wrap your head around. But there is something interesting going on in this film with the entire concept, the real enemy in this film being the AI, the sentient algorithm that has gone rogue. And actually, I feel like this film should have been titled Ghost Protocol with all the references to a ghost. There's ghosts from Ethan's past, and people keep disappearing throughout the film, and the elephant in the room is this AI entity that all these different governments and rogue actors are trying to control. The film, I'm just going to say, this is a critical review. I'm going to say what I liked, and there's definitely some things I didn't like about this film. First of all, I like the performances. I think they went with a great cast. The thing that sets Mission Impossible apart from James Bond, one of the many things that sets it apart, is that you don't go to see the character. You're very much going into one of these movies to see Tom Cruise. If there was any other actor under any other circumstances, these movies wouldn't work. Because there's something about Tom Cruise and the authenticity that he brings to his performances and the dedication to his stunt work, and these movies in particular, that puts asses in the seat. And with James Bond, you're going to see the international man of mystery. There are so many different actors and so many different interpretations at this point, over 20 something films, that James Bond is sort of a cliche at this point. But there's something about Mission Impossible where they're trying to up the ante with each film. And this film is split into two halves, but I don't think they would have done it unless they were going to do it right. And that's why the first stunt that they filmed was the first scene of the movie. And I really don't like the idea of sequels. I'm tired of sequel culture, and I'm tired of things being split into two halves, like the Into the Spider-Verse recently, Across the Spider-Verse, I think it's called, and they set up their typical Marvel sequel in the closing credits. And this movie, I don't think, is guilty for the same reasons, because they simply wanted to end on a high note. This is the last entry in the series, so they obviously wanted to put it all together, and they had too much footage for one film, so they split it up into two halves. But I have to say that, and I've seen some other people say the same thing, that the stunts in this movie are good. I like the cinematography, and I like the way that the actors are filmed and the way that they're framed. They're going back to a lot of the Dutch angles, which De Palma used in the very first movie. If you go back all the way to the first Mission Impossible, which was actually pretty impressive for its time. Of course, they've gone to another level with the stunts that they do. But the way that the film is presented in terms of the actors, I actually really enjoyed the cast, the supporting cast. That's another thing about Mission Impossible, that Ethan doesn't just have a Bond girl. He's got a whole bunch of ladies. He's got a quite the cast, supporting cast of nice ladies in his film. And you've got Simon Pegg. He brings some personality. You've got Ving Rhames. He brings his charm. I really like the actor that plays the CIA director. I very much like his voice. He was all over the trailer. Sounding way more serious and way more important than he really is. But he's an interesting actor that they brought back also from the first film. Cary Elwes, he has a small role in this movie as sort of a villain, I guess you could say. I don't want to see what happens to his character, but the performances to me are the standout quality of MI7. There's obviously the famous, infamous bike stunt, which you're waiting the entire film to see. And honestly, it's a bit confusing because when you finally see it, I'm not quite sure how they did it. We saw the behind the scenes footage of how they filmed it, which was very impressive. But in the shot that is used in the film, the shot is edited up into several different parts, and it would appear as though they must have used some special effects to remove the ramp, which is what they used in order to actually perform the jump safely. But it's a completely different shot in the film, and I do have a problem with some of the editing. Of course, there's going to be a lot of edits because of the nature of putting the stunt choreography together. There's one scene in particular where Tom Cruise is stuck on the train track, and there's an oncoming train, and there's this sort of deceptive edit where it seems like he's not going to be able to make it out of the harm's way of the train, and then in the very next shot, he just miraculously dives out of the car, which explodes, and then he's somehow okay. I don't love the edits, those kind of edits. And then there are other scenes where he comes crashing through a window, or there's the whole sequence at the very end of the film, which is, I guess, the cliffhanger setting up the part two, but it's quite literally a cliffhanger where the train is hanging off of the mountain and the train carts are disassembling and falling into pieces, and it reminds me of obviously Uncharted 2, that unforgettable opening sequence in Uncharted 2. And here they've somehow done it in real life, and it's quite impressive. It doesn't impress me as much because I've seen it in, I guess, a video game, but the way that it was done here is quite impressive. But because of that deceptive bike jump, I'm not really sure what's actually real and what isn't real in this movie. I imagine that most of the stunt choreography is legit, which is really the selling point of going to see Mission Impossible, because you're going to see real stunt performers. There are certainly many moments that will have you wondering, how did they pull this off? How did they pull off the little battle sequence on top of the train and going into the tunnel? These guys are fighting on a moving train, something out of Hitman, and then they're casually dodging out of the way of the traffic lights, and they're dodging under the tunnel, and they're still going in the tunnel. So that's a great sequence. Not sure how they pulled it off. I imagine a mixture of real effects, practical effects, and probably they had some kind of set, some kind of wind tunnel to do that sequence. But the plot of the film is, nothing to wrap your head around. There's probably quite a few little plot holes here and there that don't make a whole lot of sense, but the villains were actually pretty interesting. There's maybe one of the most compelling villains of the franchise, a legitimate rival to Ethan, and the female assassin who played by the French actress Paume Clementif, I think. She is stunning in the film. Definitely go to see the movie to see her. And she has the smile on her face as a killer. You could definitely imagine her murdering while smiling. That's how devious she is in the movie, and I'm not sure if she's going to be in part two, but if she is, then that will make part two all the more better. But I think really the only way to really compare this film, to review this film, is to compare it to the last film. Fallout was absolutely incredible with the stunts that they did on Fallout and Rogue Nation. I think those films, at least for part one, I think Rogue Nation had better stunts, more memorable, and I think the total package of the film with the story that was actually going on, I've seen all the films, but I can't really remember. I can't really recall the plots of the other films all too well. to begin with, but this one is a little bit convoluted with this AI program, which is the true enemy of the film. And there's a theme throughout the movie about fate, and it's partially seems like the screenwriters are kind of spoiling the suspense before the events happen, and at the same time it's sort of a plot device that the characters' motivations are sort of influenced by what has been predicted by the algorithm and their own paranoia, which is kind of interesting. But the plot is somewhat predictable as you're going through the movie. But it's really more about the action scenes, and it's about the way that the actors are photographed. And I think the direction was actually pretty solid for the way that they photographed and choreographed the locations and the little fight scenes, and some very good looking actors. You're going to see some very good looking actors, and the way that they're photographed is definitely worth your entertainment, worth the price of admission to sit down and not have a very serious movie, but certainly one that you can please your senses with. The sound mixing was very good in the theater. It was a loud movie, but there are some good sound effects to be sure, and visually the film is a very good looking movie. But I don't think it's the best spy thriller that I've ever seen. I don't know if it should be 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. I do think that Fallout was more memorable. I would say Fallout and Rogue Nation were probably films that I enjoyed more. But this is only part one. Perhaps part two will have even more, even more amazing stunts and cool moments. But Tom Cruise is, as they call him in the film, the mind-reading, shape-shifting incarnation of chaos. That's what they call him in this film, and it's really just a testament to Tom Cruise and his dedication to his craft. And I do think that really that Tom Cruise is very generous with the way he has rounded out the cast. To be honest, they don't go overboard with the stunts, because I do think that this is a man who cares about his co-stars. I think he cares about his production team, and he think he wanted to have good screen time. He wanted to be fair and generous to his co-stars and allow them to have some screen time as well, even though obviously the film is centered around Tom Cruise. He is the star. But I think that they gave a lot of great moments, a lot of great action scenes also to the other actors. And so they're all very interesting characters. They all have their little moments of screen time. And I think this is different from your usual star vehicle. I think that Tom Cruise is there, and he's doing his very best to bring his charisma and to bring his authenticity. But this is not one of those films that's all about him. I don't think it's all about Tom Cruise. I think this is a franchise that could not continue without him, and obviously probably will not. But at the same time, it's a film that would not be possible without these other characters. And I think that it's a collective effort, and I think you can see that all of these actors have very good chemistry together, and they're definitely a team working together to make these spectacles. And it's like Tarantino said, I think this is a good old-fashioned spectacle. That certainly there are plenty of spectacles that you can find, but not one that quite has this level of sophistication, at least in terms of cinematography and acting. I don't think the writing is anything incredible. It's not trying to be too deep, but this is certainly a good thriller, and it's definitely a good film to see on the big screen. So I would probably give it. I'm going to be critical. I would probably give it a 7 out of 10 if I had to do a solid number score. Maybe the second half of the film will lift that score up a little bit, but I'm not going to say this is the best film in the series, because I don't think it is. I don't think Mission Impossible 7 is the best that we've seen. But perhaps on another viewing, I might feel a little bit differently. I'm still just processing what I've seen. I did appreciate the stunts. I'm sure that they worked hard to do all of them, but there is this little confusion. Am I seeing? You're not really sure if what you're seeing is real or not real in some cases. I mean, it all looks like it was legit. I mean, especially the car sequence. What I think everyone will get a good laugh at is a little car chase through Venice. That was very well done, very entertaining. Some old style slapstick, as well as some over the top stunts. And the train sequence, I think they certainly did blow up the bridge, and I think they certainly did have a train, a real train that they destroyed, and that was very impressive. But it's just that bike stunt that it looks great in the film, but I'm not sure if there was some tinkering going on there, because we all saw how they actually did that stunt, and maybe there were some other shots that we didn't see, but I think that shot might have had some post-production work done on it. But other than that, I think the stunt work is definitely top notch, but it's just the, I guess, the icing on the cake for all that they've done throughout the other films. You know, scaling the tallest building in the world, and Tom Cruise is no stranger to skydiving. I think the skydive that they did, I believe for Fallout, was far more impressive, or just as impressive, I think, is what he did jumping off the bike. But the actual free fall is very impressive. And I don't know, it's a movie that makes you wonder how they did this. It's certainly very inspiring that Tom Cruise, at his age, is putting himself through the ringer to try and entertain audiences, and he is definitely one of the great movie stars and one of the great stuntmen of all time. So it's definitely the selling point of the movie. I do think, at least for part one, they've done some great stunts, but there are a lot of other great stunts in Fallout and Ghost Protocol. Even in the original trilogy, they had some great special effects as well. So it's not a 10 out of 10 movie, but I would certainly recommend it. So I was glad to go see it, and I think if you're a fan of this type of movie, you'll definitely enjoy it. But I will be critical, because having the rest of the body of work to assess and compare it to, I don't think it's better than some of the last few entries in the series, but it's definitely up there with, I think, one of the few films that would get me to actually go and sit down in the theater and have a nice spectacle.